it just isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't be there. But last year and the year before, we hiked through Panther Town, and if you were a rock climber, you know where Panther Town is, behind Flora Knob.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never hiked Panther Town. I was 56 years old when I did that. And I was telling Daddy about it later, and I was really stunned. I mean, I'm still learning things. Stunned to find that our great-grandfather had owned that, had bought everything from Lake Toxaway to here.
Wow.
And had built Lake Toxaway, and then the dam broke. When the dam broke, so many pieces of property south of the dam were destroyed that the lawsuits that followed that were crazy, and so that required the sale of almost all of that land to pay for all those lawsuits. So by the time even Daddy was a boy, probably all they still owned was Fairfield Lake, where Camp Marywood is now, and this chunk, Lonesome Valley.
Wow. When was Dick Jennings born?
24.
Okay.
And his first summer here was when he was 7. And it was a different world back then. He said his father let him spend the days with a country gentleman who was a trapper and a hunter. And Daddy said this man would take him for the entire day on a loop that started here at Lonesome Valley and went up on the ridge of Laurel Knob and Cow Rock and came back over Ball Mountain. It would take a full day to lay a trap. And then after he did this with this man for a few times, the old man said, "Why don't you go check the line today?" And Daddy said, "I was only 7 years old and they let me go on a day hike,
really,
checking the line, and bringing back the catches."
Do you remember your grandfather?
We did never know him.
Oh, okay.
He died before we were born.
Okay. And grandma too?
We knew her very well. In fact, her portrait is in Canyon Kitchen. She lived until 1981. November of 81 she died.
How old was she?
She was 95, I think.
Okay.
And
That's cool.
she was healthy as a horse until about a year prior to her death, and then quick decline, and she checked out.
What were their names?
She was Sarah. Her maiden name was Sarah Cross and Chaplin, and when she married our grandfather, she became Sarah Chaplin Jennings.
Did they build here in Lonesome Valley and live? So
Paul's house that he built here was the first
any
structure that was built here ever in Lonesome Valley. Yeah, Lonesome Valley.
Yeah. I've never seen any old chimney mounds or anything in the woods.
They stayed at Fairfield Inn when they came here in the summers, and our grandmother didn't like it.
Really?
It was too rustic for her, so she came one summer, and after that she said, "Dick, I won't be back."
Oh my gosh.
But in our house that burned down, there were cool things like wicker horse-drawn carriages and ladies' side saddles and just really cool stuff. Apparently it took over a day to get from horseback in a buggy from Asheville to here. They'd stop at, I don't know where, they'd stop and spend the night somewhere and finish the journey in 2 days.
Wasn't there a train line that came to Lake Toxaway? Did it go beyond Lake Toxaway to here?
I think it ended in Lake Toxaway, but I'm not certain about that.
I think you're right.
I don't even remember that.
How about Canaan Land? Did you have any interaction with Chris Williams and Canaan Land? Have you been there? I'll tell you about it later.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
That's a good story.
Cool.
Well, let's see. What else can we talk about? Oh, there was an old story that the climbers used to tell of they called him a hippie, came into Lonesome Valley, and he was going to settle in the far end of the valley. And he was a climber, some hippie climber, squatter. And your dad and the sheriff started chasing him.
It probably wasn't the sheriff, it was probably our sheriff, Henry Nix.
Okay.
I'm trying to see where this story is.
And the story was that they became a foot chase through the woods, and the hippie tried to go across one of those old log bridges up there that were just log sills with the boards are long gone, and he ran across it and he fell and broke his leg, and he tried to sue your dad. Have you ever heard that?
That's ringing a vague bell. The only lawsuit story I remember, and just for a little background, the man that's referred to as the sheriff was probably Henry Nix, who was our caretaker, and he lived in that house.
Nixon?
Nix.
N-I-X. Henry Nix. Do you have a twin brother? Okay, no. I'm thinking of Herman and Herbert Nichols' son up there at Liberty Life property.
Right,
okay.
Right. Different family.
Okay.
Remember them. But Henry lived there in that house and raised his family there. He was there for 55 years. I know that because he came the year I was born.
Wow.
And I was 55 when he died.
Wow.
And when he arrived here, he already had 4 children. And he told my dad he needed work. So Daddy said, yeah, I can put you to work on a mink farm. Do you have anywhere to live? And he said, well, no. And Daddy said, well, you can stay in my brother's house. It's empty. And for the time being.
Yeah.
Well, he stayed 55 years. Anyway, Henry was the greatest caretaker in the world. And since we were back and forth to Asheville, it was important to have a caretaker. Back in the day, people would poach trout a lot.
Oh, wow.
And so one of his main jobs was keeping poachers at bay.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just remember somebody fell off the rock. I didn't think it was a bridge, but I may have the story wrong.
I think this is another story.
A different one. And somebody did take Daddy to court and wanted to take Lonesome Valley from us because they had fallen off of our rock.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when he said to Henry, put up signs that say no trespassing. That's what the lawyer said to do. You have to have it posted. And that removes our liability. So if somebody goes against the posting, then it's their choice.
Right.
But I think Daddy was stunned. I know he was stunned and really disappointed that somebody was
humanity.
Trying to do that. And that's why climbers weren't allowed in for a long time. Before that, nobody cared. But anyway, that's how I heard that story.
Yeah, I wonder if it was on Laurel Knob or if it was on Cow Rock or what. Yeah.
I think it was Laurel Knob, but as a foil to that story is kind of a cute story about the rainbow people. That Henry called Daddy and said, Dick, there's a bunch of hippies here and they all want to live in the valley. And Daddy said, that's all right, just let them. And so the rainbow people lived here for a summer, maybe in 74, 75. And way back there. And they didn't bother anybody, and Henry just let them do their
75,
thing.
I guess, because we came after the rainbow people.
Really?
Yeah.
How
there
many
was a lot
people?
Of nakedness.
Well, they were naked.
How many people are we talking about?
6 or 8, maybe.
Oh, not hundreds.
Not hundreds.
Oh, 6 or 8.
Yeah.
And Dick said, just let them, Henry.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, so Daddy wasn't really, he said just make sure they don't get up there on those rocks.
Yeah.
And they weren't interested in that. They weren't climbers, they just wanted peace and quiet.
I'll be darned.
And Daddy one of the reasons my father always loved this is because peace and quiet. So he understood that.
Yeah.
And nobody was here, and it didn't, as long as they didn't bother us, he didn't mind them being here.
Huh. Wow.
So that's a nice story.
Yeah, that is a great story. How about the name Bill Cuddington? Did you guys ever remember that name?
No.
He was a caver from Huntsville, Alabama, who loved rappelling, and he was the first person to rappel off Whitesides. And
was that in the thing of yours that I read?
Maybe. 1965, he came up here with Charlie Gibbs, and they had a 1,500-foot rope or something, and threw it down the middle of Laurel Knob and rappelled down and ascended the rope back up. And he said, when they got to the ground, it was just full of rattlesnakes. You know, they probably saw one or something. But, yeah.
There were a lot of rattlesnakes here growing up. Lord, I remember every summer the mink farm and trout farm men kept track of how many they killed each year.
Is that right?
Yep. And one year I remember it was when they started the Sapphire Valley Golf Course being built. Maybe 5. And that year there were 17 rattlers killed. And the big one they got in a refrigerator box. You know, a huge cardboard box that a refrigerator had come in. And that sucker was so big they went over and it was an all-day event and captured that dang rattler, and it was something like 11 feet long.
Oh, you
kidding?
Insane. Any
and
pictures?
The button used to live in the office down there.
That little rattle thingy, that's what you call that? I remember that thing.
Wow.
I never remember seeing a rattlesnake. So if she said that was when she was 5, that's about the time I was born. And so they must have cleared out the rattlesnakes.
Wow.
I remember seeing a copperhead, and that's it.
Anybody take a picture of that big one, Sally?
Yeah, there was a picture of it a long time, but I'm sure it's just one of the many that got burned up.
Oh, so a lot of that
Yeah.
memorabilia went with
Mama
the house.
had so many pictures. She
Oh my gosh.
she took a lot of photos. She had a Polaroid, one of
Yeah.
the first ones, and she was a big photographer. And we did have lots of shoe boxes of pictures, but they're long gone.
Oh gosh.
Pre-digital age, certainly.
Has anybody ever come to talk to y'all before me about this kind of history of the family in the valley?
That one fellow that came and talked to us. Now I can't remember his
The
name.
New York Times guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget his name too.
Yeah, that was a nice little article. Did y'all like that?
Yeah.
I thought that was
There were
some.
some
except
unusual
for-
liberties taken.
I don't remember the details.
Part where they described me, I wasn't happy with that. They talked about Sally, how tall and thin she was.
But I was equine too,
and
remember?
equine. I thought that was a compliment. I didn't think that was bad. And they said, and the younger one is shorter, younger, and hobbles on a cane. And so that was my one moment.
But
in
she
New
had just
York.
had hip surgery.
Oh my gosh.
I was not thrilled with that.
Is that right? I have to
But other
reread
than
it.
that, it was a nice article because it's funny because the man's assignment was to come to the South, anywhere in the South, and find a family that was fighting, like the Hatfields and the McCoys sort of, and in disagreement about developing their property.
Uh-huh.
And a friend of ours in town, William
You know
McKee,
William McKee.
said, you got to go talk to the Jennings. They're not fighting, but they are getting ready to develop their property, and it's a big deal because they've owned it for over 100 years,
Oh, yeah.
3, 4, 5 generations, and it's intense for them.
Uh-huh.
So go talk to them. And honestly, the author
Randall.
Randall, he tried so hard to find disagreement between the three of us. He talked to us all separately, and then he would run stories that one said, or comments, and try to find friction.
That's funny.
It was his point. It was his goal in
Yeah.
life.
Oh
And,
my gosh.
Fortunately, he couldn't, and I was happy about that.
But he threw in the cane.
Yeah, he did do that.
Was this the New Yorker magazine or the New York Times paper?
It was the magazine that's in the Sunday's paper
Okay. In recent years or
It was
long ago?
of 07.
Oh, okay. I think I've got that. Because there's not been two, right?
No, there's
No.
just been one.
Okay.
It was before, the economy started to even waver.
Yeah.
And things were still going really well. We had started selling property here in 06. And in the first months, I would say looking back was the apex of the economy in the real estate here
Yeah.
in this end of Jackson County. And we sold, I don't know, I feel like it's 28 lots in 6 weeks. Thomas could clarify that, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah.
And, then it dropped off, and then of course 08 happened, and so 08 through 11 and into 12 really, it's gotten pretty stagnant, but it's gangbusters again.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
yeah.
Now, did the Jennings family, did your family own, how much land did they own? Do we know?
33,000 acres.
33,000 when great-granddad started buying up parcels? Is there any document that you guys have stumbled upon that's really got more history of this closer area, the Cashiers area, that I could research?
There is you need to ask Thomas that question because
Okay.
he could answer it better than we can. There is a person, a lady, who has written a book called, I can't remember, but it's in a lot of these property owners' homes.
Yeah.
You can buy it in town. It's a small paperback.
Oh.
And I think it's real factual.
Okay.
I think she did a lot of homework.
She came and spoke here
Yeah.
one evening at my request.
Do you remember her
And-
name?
No, and I feel horrible about that. But
Thomas will know.
something that I had never heard before, she told me about. The name Cashiers came from assayers who would weigh gold and give money for the gold nuggets. Fairfield Inn, before grandfather bought it, this would have been in the very end of the 1800s, there was a gold mine at the bottom of Fairfield Lake.
Hey, Chad.
And hey Chad, before the lake was filled in, a lot of gold was found. And Sayers would come up from either Georgia or South Carolina and set up tables and tents for a week or so at the crossroads of 64 and 107.
Uh-huh.
And they were the Cashiers,
Oh, wow.
thus the name.
Cashiers.
Uh-huh. And I believe the lady's name's Elizabeth. Anyway, she is full of facts about this area, and her family goes back as far as our family.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't grow up knowing of her, but she's fascinating and a wealth of information, so it would be good for you to talk to.
Oh, that sounds great.
Uh-huh.
And so when you guys were growing up, what did Dad say? How many acres did the family own at that point?
800?
Is that the
Yeah.
Valley Floor now?
Well, we were never told we had 800
Yeah.
acres.
Yeah,
we didn't
thought
have
we
a
had
clue.
a quarter of an acre
Yeah.
around
In
the
fact,
house.
My memory of when we were real little and had the mink farm, and it smelled really bad, and we had the pelts in our house always in the fall, and when I moved to Asheville, I saw a much grander world. I had such an insular life for 8 years, and then I saw bigger houses and fancier cars and all that stuff. So I was going to bring a friend of mine up to come for the weekend and had invited her, and she said, well, what is Cashiers? What do you have there? And I said, well, my daddy has a diamond mine. I don't even know how I knew what a diamond mine was. And she goes, oh, well, then I'd like to come. This is Becca.
Oh my Lord.
So I brought her, and I remember so well pulling up to the front door and her getting out going, where's the diamond mine?
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's why I was saying the faint of heart friends
Mm-hmm.
never came back a second time, but
Yeah.
but we had regulars that came every year and worked and just loved it.
Do you stay in touch with them to this
Yeah,
day?
very much. I was in my best friends were Betty and Peggy, and we were in each other's weddings, and they were always around. And then Sally's friends, Beanie and Nancy and Pugs and Becca,
Yeah.
were in all each other's weddings, and so yes, we definitely stay in touch.
That's great.
Uh-huh.
Now, how hard of a decision was it, or was it hard of a decision when the family decided to develop the floor of the valley?
It was horrible.
Was it?
But this is the thing. Daddy had started talking to us. I remember when I was about 15, or maybe I was 16, because I drove to his office for the meeting. He called a family meeting. That meant Mother and Daddy, Sally and Dickie and Benford. And he said, never really talked about this to you kids before, but the taxes on Lonesome Valley are astronomical. I can pay them, but when I'm gone, you cannot. Or chances are you can't. And to further complicate matters, you will all get married probably and all have kids of your own. Say there's 10 or 12. They will not have grown up at Lonesome Valley. They won't have the same feeling about it that the three of you do, and you three are of the same heart and mind. So to do something in the next 30 years makes a lot more sense than passing that responsibility and burden off to 10 kids that might not be in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And we all immediately saw that as sensible. And it wasn't for another 20 or 30 years that we stepped up and did it.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of time to get used to it.
Yeah. Wow.
I think I swallowed a bug. You go.
But that is true. It was sort of a metamorphosis
Yeah.
intellectually, I guess. But when we began to think about it, we had the wonderful luxury of time. So we did take time, and I think we went through 3 or 4 different land planners and different ideas and ideologies before we came up with the one that we had. And even that went through some changes too. Initially, I think we conceived of 200 and maybe 280 lots, and then it went down to 200 and then maybe 180, and in actuality it's going to be 120 something, I think, when everything is built out. So in 800 acres, that's pretty good, and a third of it is green space. And I think that when we heard that we could do that, that is what made a big difference. The day I heard that this meadow would look like this,
Uh-huh.
until I was dead,
Yeah.
way
It's okay
beyond.
with it.
Yeah.
And way beyond.
In perpetuity. It's been given to the Nature Conservancy. So this and several other places in the valley will never be allowed to be built on. And our goal, and we've done it, it's a miracle, was that when you step on this property in 200, 300, 500 years from now, it looks the same. Yes, there will be houses in the woods on the periphery, but that's what you will see. And that makes us very
That's
happy.
great. That's so cool. Now, I think, looking at Thomas's maps and stuff, that maybe Laurel Knob is not actually part of Lonesome Valley, but Cow Rock is.
That's correct.
Is that right? Is that the way it's always been?
I think, I
think
thought so.
I think that the face of Flora Knob has been bought by, and you would know this, I'm sure, the group of climbers from Atlanta.
Well, the Carolina Climbers Coalition
Yeah.
did purchase it 07-ish.
Yeah.
But prior-
Liberty Life or
No, Liberty Life.
Oh no, Dr. Tom German has a house on top, and he owned 5 acres, maybe more on top, but he owned the face. And the face
I
was
think
of
you're
no
right.
use to him, so they
Yeah.
approached Dr. Tom German
Yeah, that's
from
right.
Savannah, Georgia. But before that, I was just wondering if it had ever been technically Laurel Knob, because I know as climbers in the 70s, we were all lived in fear of the sheriff, Nick,
Yeah, right.
and Herman and Herbert Nicholson on top.
Yeah.
We were hemmed in.
that is
Yeah.
hilarious.
And
Well,
so we
were-
assumed that it was Liberty Life Insurance
It probably was.
back in the 70s, but prior to that, I don't know who had it.
And again,
We don't
Thomas
either.
could tell you that.
Yeah.
And
But
it is funny that we didn't know we owned it. Our father was very careful to never really share with us much about what we owned, and he just didn't ever want us to feel rich and entitled.
Yeah.
And we didn't, because we worked in manure, and
It flies. Yeah.
and so it was a funny kind of switch to find out, well, you've got this land and a lot of it, and here's your responsibility to take care of it and make sure good things happen, because we really didn't know we had it. I mean, that sounds crazy because you look at that, but he was he kept his cards close to his chest, and I guess we're all glad he did.
Are Mom and Dad pleased the way it's turning out?
Very.
Great.
Yeah, they
That's
love it.
wonderful.
They don't get up here all that often, but when they come, they love it.
Yeah. Good.
Last month, our brother's grandchild was christened here, and Mom and Daddy came up for that. And
Nice.
Dickie drove them up, and I drove them back to Asheville. And before we left, I drove them around the loop.
Yeah.
And they have done that many times, but they're very forgetful now. And, you know, sometimes that can be sad, but on this particular day, it wasn't sad. They said, we've never seen this loop before. It is just spectacular.
Oh, that's nice.
And
yeah.
they said, you guys have done such a great job. And when I dropped them off, they said, this is the happiest we've been in so long, because Lonesome Valley is just the way we want it to be.
That's beautiful.
And so even though they forget, every time they are reminded, it's like a brand new story.
Yeah,
And,
that's
and
great.
it's very neat.
That's cool. Well, that's a good place to end it, because you got me choked.